One thing the Christian church is really ignorant on is who Ephraim and who Babylon is. And, well, what you get to is that the entire Christian church, they are Ephraim. They are Babylon. Um, and so, like, just to put it simply, like, you can easily see through the characteristics of Ephraim, like, throughout um, Genesis and throughout the prophets, that Ephraim is the United States. And you see the exact same thing with Babylon. And so to understand this, you have to understand who Israel is. And so what happened to Israel is that they were devoured amongst the Gentiles. They were scattered through the house of Israel. The house of Israel, they're also represented by Samaria and Ephraim, right? And then so they weren't to rise up until the last days. And you see this prophesied like through Ezekiel 4 and Leviticus 26, right? Because their punishment was sevenfold from 390 years to 2,730 years. And so in the last days, they wake up. But, so in any case, so some of the attributes of Ephraim. So you start it in Genesis 41, so verse 51. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God said, He hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. So this Ephraim, right, because this is the literal Ephraim, he was this younger son. And then Manasseh, he's the elder, right? And then so this is even represented by the United States and by the British Commonwealth, as you kind of like go down, like how they are prophetically represented. But this kind of lays the framework, and then so you go to Genesis 48, and you learn that Ephraim, he's supposed to become this multitude of nations, right? So Genesis 48, verse 11, and Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, God hath showed me also thy seed. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. Right, so it's commonly that the firstborn, right, Manasseh in this case, should receive that like greater blessing, because that's what the firstborns usually receive. But you don't see that that's the case here. Verse 14, and Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Manasseh's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, and God which fed me all my life long unto this day. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, in the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. So they're supposed to be in this multitude, right? Ephraim and Manasseh, they're going to be these separate multitudes. And so continuing, verse 11, and when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, right, this is the younger son, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. So Manasseh, yeah, he'll be great, right? Yeah, the British Commonwealth. At one point, they were like kind of over all the nations and stuff. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations, right? And so you see this represented in two different ways. Because one, you have the United States, right? They're this multitude of nations in a nation, right? All these different nationalities. You even have them known as this melting pot, and I'll mention that in a second. And he blessed them that day, saying, "And thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh." And he set Ephraim before Manasseh, right? And so Ephraim, while he was the younger son, he received this bigger blessing and became a multitude of nations, right? A multitude of states in a nation, and a great nation. And so you can just easily look on places like Wikipedia, whatever, and you see that they say this about the United States, right? So this melting pot word, the melting together metaphor wasn't used by the 1780s. The exact term melting pot came into general usage in the United States after it was used as a metaphor describing a fusion or mixture of nationalities, right? A multitude of nations. That's exactly what it is. Cultures and ethnicities, but yeah, that's exactly what America is. We don't have that as, no other country is actually represented really like that. But if you think about, if somebody says, oh, what country is a melting pot? Or what country is a melting pot of nations or whatever, of nationalities, they're only going to think about America. And so, right, and then you continue even going down to who Babylon is, right? Because when you look at the qualities of Babylon and Ephraim, they're basically the same thing. And so Jeremiah 50 verse 23, how is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How has Babylon become a desolation among the nations? Right, so Babylon is supposed to be this hammer of the whole earth. Well, what nation is the hammer of the whole earth? Because I don't know anybody else besides America, right? Everybody looks at America as this hammer of the whole earth. If America says something, then the whole world hears it. But if Canada says something, maybe only America hears it or something. So Jeremiah 50 verse 32, and the most proud shall stumble and fall, and none shall raise him up. And I will kindle a fire in his cities, and it shall devour all round about him. And then Jeremiah 51, verse 42, the sea is come up upon Babylon. She is covered with the multitude of the waves thereof. Her cities are a desolation, a dry land and a wilderness, a land wherein no man dwelleth, neither doth any son of man pass thereby. So Babylon, like Ephraim, is this multitude of cities, right? Ephraim is called this multitude of nations, right? Babylon is this multitude of cities in this one nation. And it's supposed to be this very great nation. And then so lastly, so this is kind of now this spiritual sort of aspect of it. Yeah, you have the literal of oh yeah, there's all these states and a nation or whatever. But so Revelation 17 verse 4 to 5, and I have this all in a document, but, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, and having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So not only is Babylon represented as this multitude of nations, but you also see it's this mother of harlots, right? And so this is represented as the thousands and thousands of denominations, right, in the Christian church. Because you have that Catholic Church, which represents the mother, right? They were established from 322 AD, but really from the founding. And then from that you have all these different splits and sects and whatever. And then so you have upwards of 50,000 denominations, right? Those are the harlots, right? Because the Catholic Church, it's the mother of harlots. So next, and so this is all describing Ephraim, right? Ephraim at Babylon. And so now in Isaiah 28, you learn of Ephraim being this very proud nation. Well, there's not many super proud nations out there. Like, sure, you might have Israel. That's a really proud nation, but you might have Russia or China. But like, you don't really hear them like spreading that too much. But if you go outside the country, like if you go outside the United States, there's one country that everybody will think about that is super proud. But so Isaiah 28 verse 1, woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower. So it also has to be that beauty, that pride, it also, like, what makes them great, it also has to be fading, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. So Ephraim, right, you learn already that he's supposed to be this very great nation. And so he also becomes this very proud nation. But his beauty is fading. And so why is everybody saying, make America great again? Right? Because they recognize that the beauty of America is fading. And so even here, it's like you're going to have people say, oh, Ephraim, he was just at that time or whatever, like in Genesis or whatever. But then he's already dead. And then Isaiah 28, it's talking about Ephraim again, right? So it's this spiritual sort of thing, right? Because Ephraim, like, although like you might not even be born in America, like you take on that drunkenness, that pride, right? Because drunkenness is pride. And then so you see the same thing with Babylon. And so in Jeremiah 50, starting in verse 29, call together the archers against Babylon, all ye that bend the bow, camp against it round about, let none thereof escape. Recompense her according to her work, according to all that she hath done. Do unto her, for she hath been proud against the Lord, against the Holy One of Israel. Therefore shall her young men fall in the streets, and all her men of war shall be cut off in that day, saith the Lord. Behold, I am against thee, O thou most proud, right, the most proud nation, saith the Lord God of hosts. For thy day is come, the time that I will visit thee, and the most proud shall stumble and fall, and none shall raise him up. And I will kindle a fire in his cities, and it shall devour all round about him. Right, so Babylon is also this most proud. And then so now you go to Hosea, which the book of Hosea is all about Ephraim, and you get some other details about Ephraim in Hosea. It's like Hosea is all about America, really. But to Hosea 13, starting in verse 1, because you see that Ephraim, they also learned the ways of the heathen. Like as you look at all these characteristics, so I'm going to sum it up at the end, but it's like you're not going to get these characteristics of any other country, but like all of them together. So verse 1, when Ephraim spake trembling, he exalted himself in Israel. But when he offended in Baal, he died. And now they sin more and more, and have made the molten images of their silver and idols, according to their own understanding. All of it, the work of the craftsmen, they say of them, let the men that sacrifice kiss the calves. Right, and so this is the very reason that Ephraim got cut off, because of idolatry. Because when you look in, I think it's Numbers 1, you see like the inheritance for all the 12 tribes of Israel. And so with that, it's like you have Ephraim and Manasseh, they receive then like part of inheritance. Joseph and Levi, they don't receive inheritance, although they are part of the 12 sons of Jacob. But then over time, you see that Dan gets cut off because of idolatry. And then the same thing with Ephraim. And so that's why those two are not mentioned in the 144,000 in Revelation 7. But instead, you have Joseph gets a portion, and Levi gets a portion, right? They're back in. So, and then the same thing with Babylon, right? They're, like we just read in Revelation 17, they're the mother of harlots. They've caused all people to, like, partake in their fornication, their abominations, right? This is idolatry. This is pagan idolatry. That's what Babylon is all about, right? Because you have, like, Nimrod and stuff. Like, that's all just Babylonian stuff. But, so now, Ephraim it's also this place where Satan is going to get cast down when they're destroyed. And so, like, you have all the Christians saying, like, oh, well, Isaiah, like, that was for that time. But when has Satan been cast down, right? Especially into America. Like, that's never happened. And he was never cast down into Ephraim, like, in the past or whatever. But so Isaiah 28, we're going to read again, starting verse 1. Woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. Behold, the Lord hath a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest of hail and a destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand. Right? This person, whatever, that is Satan. Right? You learn that in Revelation 12. Right? Because this is at the time of the sixth seal. Right? And you have to learn the parable of the fig tree, where Yeshua is quoting Isaiah 28. The crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim shall be trodden under feet, and the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley shall be a fading flower, and as the hasty fruit before the summer. Right, learn the parable of a fig tree, when its branches yet tender, and it springs forth its leaves, you know that summer is nigh, even at the doors. Right, that's what he's quoting. Which when he that looketh upon it seeth, while it is yet in his hand, he eateth it up. So Satan gets cast down when this place is destroyed. And so, yeah, Matthew 24, verse 32, now learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know that the summer is nigh. So, directly quoting Isaiah 28. And so in Revelation 12, you learn, like, it plainly tells you that this is Satan. So, starting in verse 9, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. Right? How is the whole world deceived? Because of all this fornication and abominations that Babylon, that Ephraim is spreading to the four corners of the earth, through the many cities that are in it, right? The many harlots, the 50,000 denominations. That's how the whole world is getting deceived. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down. Right, and so you saw in Isaiah 28 that he's going to cast down to the earth with the hand, right, this tempest of hail, this destroying storm, this flood of mighty waters. Verse 11, which accused them before our God day and night. Verse 11, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell on the earth. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, but he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Right, that short time is a little season, right? Instead of 40 years, as like the first Exodus in that first time was, it's going to be 3.5 years, right? A time, and half a time, or also 1,203 score days, right? That's 3.5 years. So, and then Revelation 18, verse 2, and he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Right, so that's when Babylon falls. And that's when Satan is cast down, right? It's become this habitation of devils. So now, you have in Hosea 5, where you learn that Ephraim and Judah, they dwell together, right? So you have a lot of Jews in the political state of Israel. Although, like, because Judah is just they represent just two tribes. When you see, like, Judah or House of Judah, because it's Judah and Benjamin. Because Ephraim represents the house of Israel, right? The 10 northern tribes. And so all the people in the political state of Israel today, they're just the house of Israel. I mean, the house of Judah, not the house of Israel. So Hosea 5, verse 3, I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hid from me. For now, O Ephraim, thou committest whoredom, and Israel is defiled. Right? How are they committing whoredom? Through pagan idolatry, because it's this spiritual adultery, spiritual whoredom is idolatry, right? Because you're being a whore, like of God or whatever. So you're like going to all these other gods. Verse 4, they will not frame their doings to turn unto their God, for the spirit of whoredoms is in the midst of them, and they have not known the Lord. And the pride of Israel doth testify to his face. Therefore shall Israel and Ephraim fall in their iniquity. Right? They'll fall. Babylon is fallen. Right? They're going to fall in that day. But then who also falls? Judah also shall fall with them. Right? So then if they're going to fall at the same time, then they have to be dwelling together. And then so when you even look in, so like how many Jews are in like different countries in the world? You have Russia, it's like only like 100 and some thousand. And that's the same thing with Argentina. The UK has about 300 and some thousand. Canada has about 400,000. Same thing with France. And then Israel and the United States, they both have about 7.5 million Jews, right? And then so in America, you also have all these Christians, right, which represent Ephraim. And they dwell together, right, in America, in Babylon. So next, in Hosea 8, you learn that Ephraim, not only did he do these pagan idolatry, pagan feasts, right, Christmas and Easter, but then because he had all this sin, right, then he repented at one point. Some of them did. And then they started to try to do God's feasts outside the land, right, which is profaning them. You learn that in Deuteronomy 12 and Deuteronomy 16. Don't do it in all the place where thou seest, but in the place where he put his name. So, Hosea 8, verse 11. Because Ephraim hath made many altars to sin, right, through pagan idolatry, altars, God's feasts, shall be unto him to sin. I have written to him the great things of my law, right, Matthew 23, verse 23, judgment, mercy, and faith. But they were counted as a strange thing, right, and you also have Deuteronomy 12, that's counted as a strange thing. Verse 13, they sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offerings, and eat it, right? What is that? That's the Passover, that's all these other feasts, right, that God has. They're his feasts, and for all those feasts, you have to sacrifice, right? You eat the sacrifice. That's how it works. So they sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offerings, and eat it. But the Lord accepteth them not. Now will he remember their iniquity, and visit their sins. They shall return to Egypt. So they're doing these feasts outside the land. They're profaning God's feasts, right? So it's sin. And then so the end result is that they're going to go into great tribulation, right? Satan is cast down into them. So that's exactly what it is. And so you won't find, like, outside America, like, yeah, you'll have people that are doing God's feasts, whatever, like outside of Jerusalem. But you see a large portion of people, they were woken up in America. And so just a recap of everything that you see about Ephraim and Babylon, right, to put all these qualities together to really identify, right? So Ephraim, he's a younger nation that becomes the greatest, most proud nation as a collection of smaller nations that dwell with a lot of Jews. Through its pride, it goes and does pagan idolatry, but then starts doing God's feasts profanely. Therefore, it is fading in beauty and will soon be destroyed, while at the same time, Satan will be cast into it. Right? So, I mean, that last part, right, that hasn't happened yet, right? It's still yet to be destroyed, but you compare 2 Peter 3, verse 8 with Hosea 6, 1 to 3, right, you know that Yeshua tarries for 2,000 years. But then that also includes that time of great tribulation, right? And so then that brings you to like around like either this year or the next few years, right? Where Yeshua is supposed to, where the day of the Lord is supposed to begin, and then you have Yeshua is coming, right? 3.5 years, because that's the Great Tribulation. 3.5 years after. And so that's just like knocking at the door, right? You see all those things happening in Matthew 24, and so you should know that it's because you even learn from that it's a springtime event, right? The summer is near, right? It's before the summer, and then so you're like right now, like we're in the season of that time. So what you really got to because the sin of Ephraim is clear. He does these pagan feasts, pagan idolatry, right? So you can't be doing that. You got to repent from Christmas and Easter, right? Halloween, all those things. But then also you can't just be going and start trying to save yourself and try to do God's feasts, right? We're not in the kingdom. We're not in the land yet. You have to wait until you're in the inheritance, right? So don't be doing Passover, because that's what's coming up now, unleavened bread, all those things, right? You can't be doing those things. But yeah, so check out straightastthegate.net. Let me figure out how to end this. Let's see. Did I just click this X?